Welcome back, everyone, to Getting In, a College Coach Conversation. I'm very excited because one of your current hosts is joining me today, Shannon Vasconcelos, who's obviously my colleague and also a former financial aid officer at both BU and Tufts. Hi, Shannon.
Hi, Beth. It's been a minute since we've done this together.
I know. Well, and in the ensuing time since we have done it, you have gone on to become one of our hosts. So you don't really,
Yes,
there's limited opportunity for us to ever do this again, which is
I know.
kind of makes me sad.
I
Anyway,
know.
you're here today. This is
Yes.
fun. Let's get started because we're going to be doing Q&A, but it's all going to be all finance today. So we're not going to be doing any of the admissions questions. I did coincidentally, if anyone's interested, if I answered your question in a previous segment, just last week I hosted and we did some admissions questions. All right.
Yeah.
This
And actually, we are doing I'm hosting next week and we're doing some more admissions questions next week. So if we
That's
didn't
right.
get to your admissions questions yet, sit tight. It's coming next week.
Coming next week, right? So either I answered it last week or Shannon is going to be having a guest on who will answer it next week. But today, it's all finance.
Yes.
And our first question comes to us through our YouTube channel. Just shout out for our YouTube channel if anyone is interested. We have one. And this is the question that was posted on one of our videos. I have a 529 for my 26-year-old son who lives with me. He and his younger sister will both be entering college at the same time. His sister will use some of the 529. Does my son have to report the 529 on his FAFSA? He's filing independently with no parent info on it. Interesting question.
Yeah. And short answer is no, he does not have to report it. 529s can be a little confusing to folks because they generally have a couple of different people listed on the account. They have an account owner, and actually with the 529, it's referred to as the account participant. And then they have a beneficiary. So it sounds like the parent who wrote in is the owner of this 529. So I'm sorry, well, let me step back. If the son, if her, I'm picturing this as a woman writing in, but I don't know if it's true.
Right.
If the parent's son was a dependent student, meaning they had to provide parental information on the FAFSA, then mom would have to report her 529 that she owns for her son as a parent asset on that FAFSA. Because the son is 26 years old and therefore does not require parental information on his FAFSA, there's a few different qualifications that make you independent for financial aid purposes, including being over the age of 24. He's filling out his own FAFSA. He would only have to report 529s that he owns. So if he happened to own a 529 for himself, or he had children potentially that he had 529s for. But since this is mom's 529 and mom is not on his FAFSA anymore, it does not have to be reported. And interestingly enough, mom mentioned that there's another, there's a younger sister that she's planning on using some of this 529 for. There's an interesting change this year, which is not what mom directly asked here, but for the benefit of our listeners, I'll share this, that in the past, if a parent is filling out the FAFSA, they would have to report any 529s that they own for any of their children on, potentially this one child's FAFSA. If you've got 3 kids, 3 different 529s, you're reporting that on all of your kids' FAFSAs. The kind of the full amount for everybody. A change that, so often parents would ask, they would think they've got the system figured out. Oh, I'm going to put all the money in my younger kid's 529, then I won't have to report it on my older kid's FAFSA. In the past, we would tell them, sorry, that's not going to work. You have to report any kid's 529 on each of the kids' FAFSAs. They changed it with, and regular listeners will know, something's happening called FAFSA simplification, where they changed a lot of the FAFSA rules. And they've actually changed the rules so that the previous sort of scam people thought they could run, but they couldn't. Now you kind of can. with the new FAFSA, you only, if as the parent for, again, a dependent student, which is not the case for this parent, you only have to report the 529s that you own with that child listed as a beneficiary. So in this parent's case, the son who's independent doesn't have to report it on his FAFSA. In the past, if the daughter is a dependent student, mom would have had to report like the son's FAFSA on the daughter's, the son's 529 on the daughter's FAFSA, doesn't have to anymore. So really, in this family situation, that 529 is completely invisible from the financial aid process because the son doesn't have to report it on his own, and mom does not have to report it for the younger daughter, assuming that that younger daughter is a dependent student, because the daughter's name is not listed on it as the beneficiary, is what it sounds like. It only has the son listed as the beneficiary. Now, there's an extra step now involved for mom. If that's the case, that it's just totally in the son's name, but she wants to use some of it for the daughter, you can only make a withdrawal for the beneficiary that's listed on the 529 at the time of the withdrawal, but you can change the beneficiary of a 529 within the family. So what mom would have to do at some point, you could either open up a 529 for the daughter and move money from the sons into it, or she can just change the beneficiary on the son's 529 to her daughter, make the withdrawal for the daughter, and then if the son needs some of it, you can change the beneficiary back to the son. It requires a lot of steps to do this if you are going to use one 529 for more than one child. But it is kind of an interesting thing in moving forward that parents will only have to report 529s for the one child's FAFSA that they are filling out, any 529s in that child's name as the beneficiary.
Yes. And Shannon, have we covered we haven't covered the new FAFSA in detail yet, have we? Because it's still sort of being worked out. I know we talk about it a lot, basically.
Yeah, we've started to. I think we had one segment recently to sort of get the ball rolling, and there's I think some future segments scheduled to dig deeper into it. But yes, stay tuned. Go back. I think it was in the last few weeks that we had one episode about FAFSA simplification, but there's going to be more coming up. So definitely stay tuned for more details on all the changes that are coming through.
Yeah, and the thing I would add, first of all, watch this space, but then in addition, if you're looking for anything in our archives, you can go to the blog. We blog and we talk about on the podcast. And so you can search that topic in our blog. And also we will likely be writing blogs about this too, right? So we won't just talk about it here, but we'll also be doing some blogs. So
yes,
it's a lot is really, I think, the bottom line.
It's a whole lot. And this 529, it's so much. This is something that flew under the radar for pretty much everybody. It wasn't in our, we've produced blogs and done, again, some other, we've referenced this before. We did not reference this change. We didn't realize it was kind of snuck in there in, in this 500-page bill. They changed one little line, which changed the way 529s are reported. In fact, the Department of Education released a draft of the new FAFSA a few months ago, and it was incorrect in the draft, and where it's basically it was still stated the old way, and they have since come out and said, oh no, that was in the bill, we do have to change it in the actual FAFSA that will be released later this year. That will be changed so that you only have to report 529s where the child that you're filling out the FAFSA for is listed as the beneficiary.
All right, more to come is I think our bottom line here. All right, let's jump into something that is theoretically easier. And this comes to us. This comes to us from Michael, and it's shorter anyway. And his question is, when's the best time to start searching for scholarships? I think I know the answer here.
Yeah, so we could go a few different ways with this. If we're talking about what we usually refer to as private outside scholarships, essentially scholarships from anybody other than the college, we say you could start searching for those as early as freshman year of high school. Now, if you're beyond freshman year and you haven't started yet, don't stress out. It's not a
Right.
requirement at that point. But, as soon as you start thinking about this process, starting to, kind of keep your eyes open for what might be out there, run, an online scholarship search or two. Scholarships.com is one good one where you can plug in the student's information. It will sort of spit out a list of scholarships that seem to match the student's profile. So you can do that at any time and just start keeping track of what might be out there that you might want to pursue in the future. Most of these scholarships you don't apply for until senior year of high school, but there might be a few that you could apply earlier for. And again, just keeping track of what's out there, what might be a good fit. Some of them have, certain materials that they might want you to submit, like writing an essay or doing a special project. Like the earlier you know about these things, the better. So that's why I say, it's kind of never too early to start. Also never too late to start searching. So again, don't worry about it. If you got a senior in high school, start now. Definitely check in addition to the online searches, check in with the high school counseling office. They likely have a list of local scholarships that the student can pursue. Those the local scholarships tend to be good ones to pursue. Even if they're not for a ton of money, they tend to be easier to win than some big national scholarship that you find online, because the applicant pool is just automatically narrowed down for you. So for those local ones, you're probably checking in with the school counseling office during senior year of high school. In fact, most school counseling offices, as we enter kind of the new school year, will be very busy with the college application process first, and they tend to start to turn their attention to the scholarships once they've got the bulk of students through the actual college application process. So you tend to see local scholarship awarding start to happen in January, February, March, kind of like the late winter. But what I want to step back a bit to say is that so we just talked a lot about private scholarships, outside scholarships, which aren't really the best way or the best scholarships for college.
Right.
If you want to maximize your scholarships for college, it is all about the college list, the schools that you apply to. The scholarship funding from the colleges themselves tends to be the biggest and best source of money. So when you talk about when should I start searching for scholarships, whenever you start thinking about where you're going to apply to college, think about where scholarships are going to be most likely for you. And that tends to be at the schools that you might consider more like your safety schools on the list, the schools where you are going to stand out, be well above average. Those are the schools that are going to want to recruit you the most, and so are most likely to offer you the biggest and best scholarships. So that is the primary thing I would focus on in terms of winning scholarships, is where you're going to apply, what schools will you stand out at. So as you're doing your college list and figuring out what's a reach school, what's a safety school, the schools where your grades, your test scores are well above average, those are the schools that are most likely to offer you scholarships. So making sure that you're including at least a couple schools like that on your list is really going to be the key to winning scholarships for college.
Yeah, and I mean, if the idea is that you have a set amount of money that you can afford to send your child to college, and really that's what you have, then I would even say that when you are making your list, the only schools that should go on there are schools where you have a reasonable expectation of paying that amount, right? So,
Exactly,
and I say this as longtime listeners might remember from my own experience with my son. Schools went on his list if we could either afford the list price, and that meant for us more public than private, or if we thought there was a reasonable expectation that my son would get some merit money to bring the list price down. And he did not apply for any outside scholarships, for better or worse, because I'm a convert to the idea that it just felt like it was going to be a lot of time and effort for minimal payoff. Not that $1,000 scholarship that helps pay for books is insignificant, because it's not. It's just, really, I think, especially if you need a lot more than that, putting your focus and emphasis on making sure you have a great list where your child will qualify for either financial aid or for merit scholarships is really, in my mind, the way to go.
Agreed. I tend to consider the private scholarships like the icing on the cake. If you have the time and energy for it and it can win you a few $100s, maybe a few $1,000s, wonderful. I'm not going to pass up that, walking past it on the street. I'm going to pick up that kind of money. But if
Right.
you're looking for 5, 10, 20,000, if you need that kind of assistance to afford a college, it really, in almost all cases, your best bet is through the colleges themselves and where you're going to stand out the most.
Right. And we talk a lot about that and discounting and things like that on the show.
Yeah.
So again, you can search our blogs if that's a topic that's of interest to you and find some segments where we've talked about that in the past. And we will surely be talking about it again in the future.
Sure.
Shannon, thanks so much for coming in on your week off from hosting. You'll be here next week officially hosting, but I appreciate you filling in after we had to do some segment juggling. So thank you.
My pleasure. Take care, Beth.
All right. Same to you. We're going to take another short break. And when we come back, we're going to be talking about balancing different financial priorities between students and parents. So don't go away.